Hey, what's up gamers? You have TigerChainsaw. You know what's been missing in my life the past couple of years? A great horror game that has some space elements to it. I used to get that with the Dead Space series from the late 2000s to the early 2010s. I absolutely loved that trilogy. But then EA got a hold of it, it does what it does best, and just kind of put it on the shelf. And we didn't hear from the Dead Space trilogy for a very long time. But Glenn Schofield, who was the creator of Dead Space, took his talents elsewhere and created the Callisto Protocol for the PS5. And I am very excited to review that game today. Now, if this is your first time on my channel, or if you just haven't yet, go ahead and hit that sub button because I've got tons of game reviews ranging from the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, all the way up to the PS5. So hit that sub button so you can catch all of those reviews and it helps me grow. All right, let's see what Schofield's latest horror epic is and if it's better than the Dead Space trilogy. Let's get into it. Dead Space was unfortunately abandoned by EA. Sure, it had a semi-reboot with a remaster of the first game, but the director of the series had moved on. In 2022, developer Striking Distance Studios and publisher Krafton created a spiritual sequel to the Dead Space franchise with the Callisto Protocol. Glenn Schofield, the director of the original Dead Space series, was behind the game. Releasing along with the Dead Space remaster, it had some serious competition. I, for one, was ecstatic to see this game as I had been craving a horror epic for some time. The Callisto Protocol was released on December 2nd, 2022 for the PS5. Would it be the next great horror game? Or would it remain in the shadows of Dead Space? I'm here to survive all the scares in this Callisto Protocol review, starting with the plot, but be warned, spoilers are ahead. We're playing as Jacob Lee, a cargo pilot on his way to one of Jupiter's moons called Callisto. On this trip, Jacob and his co-pilot Max are transporting medical supplies to a maximum security prison run by the company that hired Jacob, United Jupiter Company, referred to as UJC. While en route, Jacob and Max are attacked and boarded by a terrorist organization called the Outer Way, along with their leader, Danny. The attack causes the ship to crash, killing Max in the process. Severely injured, Jacob and Danny are taken in by prison security and both are thrown into the prison despite Jacob having no affiliation with the Outer Way. Not long after being imprisoned, chaos breaks out with an unknown infection spreading throughout the population, causing inmates and guards to mutate into monsters. Now, they don't call them monsters, but I don't remember what they're called, so for this review, we're just going to call them the mutants or the monsters. During all of this, an inmate named Elias frees Jacob, and together they make their way through the prison, avoiding security and the newly formed mutants. As Jacob and Elias try to escape, they discover that the infection comes from the UJC experimenting on inmates with prison warden Duncan overseeing it. The mutation of the inmates and guards comes from a parasite found underneath the surface of Callisto that has connections to ancient alien technology. Believing that they could experiment on inmates so that humans could have an evolutionary advancement, UJC built the prison to conduct these experiments. The two attempt to escape in a maintenance ship, but Elias dies, causing Jacob to look elsewhere for help. He runs into Danny, who tries to blame the entire ordeal on Jacob, claiming that he knew that he was transporting the infection samples to the prison. Eventually, she trusts Jacob and realizes that he had no idea what he was transporting and is not to blame for the situation. It's revealed that this isn't the first outbreak and that UJC accidentally infected Danny's hometown, where many people died as a result. Jacob and Danny make their way to the original infection source, where Warden Cole starts to refer to the ancient alien technology and the creators of it as the architects. Danny then gets infected, but Jacob is able to save her using an experimental cure. Without Danny, Jacob continues forward toward the prison's central control. he encounters one of Warden Cole's experiments, a former captain of the prison who is mutated beyond recognition. The two of them fight, with Jacob killing him, but not before Jacob is severely wounded. Warden Cole sends a hologram congratulating Jacob, but saying that the entire ordeal has been a success and one big test that was set up by the UJC to analyze the infection limits. Realizing he is probably going to die from his wounds, Jacob manages to lift the containment protocols, giving Danny a chance to escape on a ship. He then sends all the data of the experiment to Danny before the prison implodes with the mutants surrounding Jacob. In a post-credits scene, the state of Jacob is unclear. It seems like he has survived, but his body has assimilated with the infection. Right from the start, you can feel the spirit of Dead Space in Callisto Protocol. That's a good thing. No, that's a great thing. Schofield understands how to create space horror, and even though the majority of the game takes place on the planet, there's that sense of isolation that can be found in space. I was pretty impressed with the graphics. I felt like the items, characters, and environments were all polished and realistic. The gore and the violence of this game were some of the best I have ever experienced in a video game. It can be grotesque, but you can't look away because you're blown away by what the developers created. It's shocking at times, but you can see the attention to detail that went into crafting the wounds, injuries, and gore. But moving on from the gore, being on a planet covered in snow, I thought the snow effects were spot on. Everything from the impressions, footprints, and snowflakes were flawless. The facial expressions that are shown through the helmet were great. You know exactly how Jacob is feeling, even if he isn't saying it. Before I played this game, all I heard were complaints from gamers who thought this was going to be Dead Space in terms of the combat, but were disappointed with the amount of melee force. Maybe I was more prepared than they were, but I found it to be a great balance of shooting and hand-to-hand combat. The controls were good, and the dodging and the blocking were satisfying. I never got sick of bashing someone's head in. Once I mastered how to dodge, I was very tough to hit. The combat can be very intimate as you fight in small rooms and narrow hallways, so mastering how to dodge will help you in your survival. You won't just be fighting the mutants though, you'll be fighting plenty of robots, or in my case, avoiding them as much as possible. I found the security robots to be extremely difficult to fight, so I tried to avoid them at all costs. Even though they were difficult, I did like their inclusion because it changed it up in terms of enemy variety. Shooting and bashing your enemies isn't the only way to kill them. There are plenty of environmental hazards that you can use to kill, and if you're good, you can kill multiple enemies this way. You'll be able to see the layout of the rooms or the paths fairly well before proceeding. It's important to mentally map out how you will proceed, especially if there are robots patrolling the path. It can be very difficult in some portions. Personally, I struggled a ton on an outdoor garden section that involved multiple security robots and some mutants. I had to replay that portion a ton before learning the enemy patterns and successfully sneaking around the place while taking the enemies out. Going back to the graphics, I loved breaking the glass on the cabinets or the shelves. There are items behind the glass that look ordinary, or you think that they wouldn't do anything. But if you break the glass, you'll be able to pick up some of the items and add them to your inventory. They aren't highlighted until you break into the cabinets. It just felt like this was a more realistic touch to the game. It's not going to point out to you that there are useful items. You have to find them yourself. Touching on some of the characters in Callisto Protocol, I did enjoy teaming up and working with Elias. I was bummed to see him not make it, but on the other hand, I was annoyed that every time that I met up with Danny, we would get separated. It ended up being very predictable that something was going to happen to split us up, so whenever I did see her, I knew it wasn't going to be for long. While the game is very polished, it's not without a few glitches and flaws. I ran into a strange one where my game randomly errored out. I had to restart the entire game to continue, and then there was this instance of the ammo count number randomly floating. It was a little bit bizarre and took away from the moment. The ending of Callisto Protocol was wrapped up nicely. The final boss fight was a tough one, but I was able to beat him on my first try. It was the perfect balance of challenging, but not excessive, throughout the 2 stages that it takes to defeat him. They also leave the game on a cliffhanger with Jacob's status, leaving the door open for a sequel. The Callisto Protocol filled a huge void that was left by the Dead Space franchise as fans craved for brutal combat and horror. For the most part, the game delivers with stellar graphics, smooth combat controls, and a plot that will keep you marching forward to see what happens next. Sure, it can be a little bit predictable, and there were some weird glitches, but the Callisto Protocol showcases many great elements that create an enjoyable horror game. The Callisto Protocol scores an 8.5 out of 10, making this a great game. Gamers, that was my review of the Callisto Protocol from 2022 on the PS5. I would love to hear from all of you on your thoughts on this game and if it's any better than the Dead Space remake, or does it remind you of the Dead Space franchise? To me it did, but it did it in all of the good ways, and I was really excited to play this game, and I wonder if there is a sequel down the line. So while you're typing away, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel because I've got tons of content on it. Lots of game reviews ranging from the 80s, the 90s, the early 2000s, and I've got tons of PS5 reviews on this channel. So go ahead and hit that sub button so you can watch all of that next. Speaking of next, it's going to be my Siphon Filter 3 review on the PS1, and unfortunately that was my most disappointing Siphon Filter 3 game on the PS1, and you can learn all about that coming up next. Gamers, thanks for watching, and make sure you play a video game today.